The message came without warning on a cold Tuesday morning. Every screen on Earth suddenly went dark, then flickered back to life showing the same image. In the military command center floating high above Earth, Admiral Richard Carter froze as he watched an alien appear on the display in front of him. The creature was tall and thin, its body made of something that looked like living crystal. Light moved through it in strange patterns. When it spoke, the words came out in perfect English, though the voice sounded flat and emotionless like a computer trying to sound human. "I am Ambassador Velkoth of the Galactic Council," it said. "We have been watching your species for 3 of your years. You have broken our laws. You have built colonies in places that are forbidden. You have taken resources from worlds that are protected. You have placed military bases in 12 sectors that belong to the Council." Lieutenant Patricia Hayes stood next to Carter, her fingers moving quickly across her computer screen. She pulled up maps of space, checking every claim the alien was making. Her face went pale. Everything the alien said was true. Humans had gone into those areas knowing they might be restricted territory. They had done it anyway because those places had planets where people could live and materials that Earth needed badly. "This is your final warning," Velkoth continued. "You have 30 Earth days to leave those sectors. Remove your colonies. Take apart your military bases. Take your people home. If you do not obey, we will force you to leave. The choice is yours." The screens went dark again, returning to normal as if nothing had happened. Carter stood in silence for a long moment, then turned to Hayes. "Get me President Morrison, now, and contact every colony governor from here to the edge of our territory. Wake them up if you have to. This changes everything." 2 hours later, President Helen Morrison sat in the White House Situation Room deep underground. The room was full of people. Military generals, scientists, advisors, cabinet members. Everyone looked worried. General Paul Dixon stood at the front of the room next to a huge display showing a map of human space. "They're not lying about the facts," Dixon said, his voice hard. "We knew those sectors were marked as restricted on old alien maps we found years ago. We sent colonists there anyway. Those worlds were too valuable to ignore. Good planets for farming, rare metals for our factories. We made a choice to take the risk." "How many people are living in those sectors?" Morrison asked. 47 million colonists, Hayes reported from her position at the orbital station, her voice coming through the speakers in the room. "Another 2 million military personnel and support staff. The resources we're pulling from those regions provide 30% of what our factories need to operate." Morrison leaned forward, her elbows on the table. "And if we do what they want? If we evacuate everyone and shut everything down?" The chief economist spoke up from his seat. "Economic collapse within 5 years, maybe sooner. Those colonies are holding up our entire civilization now. Remove them and everything falls apart. Food shortages, factory closures, unemployment, it would be chaos." "And if we refuse?" Morrison asked, though she could see the answer on every face in the room. "War," Carter said simply from his orbital command center, "against an enemy we know almost nothing about. An enemy that can send messages to every screen on Earth at the same time. That kind of technology means they're far ahead of us." Morrison sat back in her chair thinking hard. Around her, people waited for her decision. Outside this room, billions of people on Earth and dozens of colonies in space were waiting too. The news had spread fast. Everyone knew about the ultimatum now. The alien's message had reached every device, every screen, every phone. There was no hiding it. "We need information," Morrison finally said. "Get our intelligence people working. I want to know everything we can find out about this Galactic Council. Who they are, where they are, how strong they are. We have 30 days. Use them wisely." She stood up and everyone in the room stood with her. "In the meantime, open diplomatic channels. Try to talk to them, see if they'll negotiate. Maybe we can find a compromise. But prepare for the worst. General Dixon, start getting our military ready quietly. I don't want to provoke them, but I won't leave us defenseless either." As the meeting ended and people filed out, Morrison stayed behind with her closest advisor, Gregory Palmer. He waited until they were alone before speaking. "Helen, you know we can't win a war with them. If they're advanced enough to hack every computer on Earth simultaneously, their weapons must be beyond anything we have." "I know," Morrison said quietly, "but I also know we can't just abandon 47 million people. Those colonists built homes out there. They raised families. They trusted us to protect them. What kind of government abandons its own citizens because some aliens we've never met tell us to? A government that wants to survive, Palmer said bluntly. Morrison turned to look at him. Greg, my father used to say that some things are worth more than survival. Dignity, honor, the right to choose your own path. If we roll over and obey every time someone threatens us, we might survive, but we won't be worth saving. Palmer nodded slowly. He'd expected this answer. Helen Morrison hadn't become president by being the kind of person who backed down easily. Then we better hope our intelligence people find something useful. Because in 30 days, we're either leaving those sectors or we're going to war. There's no middle ground here. Morrison walked to the window of the Situation Room, looking up at the ceiling as if she could see through the layers of concrete and steel to the sky above. 30 days. 1 month to decide the future of our entire species. The Council picked the wrong species to threaten, Greg. Humans didn't get to the stars by following orders. We got here by being too stubborn to quit, even when everyone said we should. She turned back to face him. Get me everything we know about alien technology. Every crashed probe we've found. Every strange signal we've detected. Every odd structure we've discovered on dead worlds. Somewhere in all that data, there has to be something that tells us what we're really dealing with. And Greg, one more thing. Yes, Madam President? Start reaching out to the colonies. Not official channels. Quiet conversations. I want to know what they're thinking. If we decide to fight, I need to know they'll stand with us. This can't be Earth forcing a decision on people 40 light years away. They get a say in their own fate. Palmer nodded and left the room. Morrison stood alone in the silence, feeling the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her shoulders. Somewhere out in the dark between the stars, the Galactic Council was waiting for humanity's answer. They thought they'd given an ultimatum that would force compliance. They didn't understand humans at all. The clock was ticking. 30 days to decide between submission and survival. Or perhaps, Morrison thought, 30 days to find a third option that the Council hadn't considered. Humans were good at finding third options when their backs were against the wall. They'd done it throughout their history. Maybe they could do it one more time. The war hadn't started yet. But in that moment, standing in the underground bunker beneath the White House, President Helen Morrison knew it was coming. The only question was whether humanity would be ready when it arrived. The order went out that same evening. While diplomats tried desperately to open communication channels with the Galactic Council, the real work began in secret facilities across Earth and beyond. Every intelligence agency, every military research division, every university science department received the same message from President Morrison. Find out everything possible about the aliens who had just threatened humanity. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Lisa Grant assembled her team in a facility that officially didn't exist. She was the head of Earth's Xenological Research Division, a department that studied alien artifacts and technology. For 20 years, her team had been collecting pieces of a puzzle. Ancient ruins on dead planets, abandoned space stations drifting in the void, wrecked ships found floating between stars. Now suddenly, all those fragments needed to form a complete picture. We always thought the galaxy was empty, Grant said to her team, displaying images on the screens that covered the walls of the briefing room. We were wrong. It wasn't empty. Someone cleaned it out. Look at these patterns. Her assistant, Marcus Bell, highlighted symbols that appeared again and again across different sites. Same architecture, same building materials, same metal alloys in the wreckage. Whatever the Galactic Council is, they've been active in this part of space for thousands of years, maybe longer. Colonel Stephen Price, the military officer assigned to work with Grant's team, stared at the images with growing unease. But where are they now? We have telescopes that can spot a ship the size of a bus from 10 light years away. We have probes in hundreds of star systems. If there's a huge alien civilization out there, why haven't we seen it? Grant pulled up a new image. It showed a massive structure floating in deep space far from any star. The photo had been taken 3 years earlier by a human colony ship. The structure was enormous, geometric, and completely dead. No lights, no energy signatures, no signs of life. They're not hiding from us. We're just looking in the wrong places. Every piece of Council technology we've found has been in the empty spaces between spiral arms of the galaxy, in the gaps where no stars shine. Over the next 2 weeks, a picture slowly formed. The Galactic Council wasn't like human civilization at all. They didn't have crowded planets full of cities and farms. They didn't have busy trade routes between thriving colonies. Instead, they seemed to exist in the darkness between stars, maintaining vast networks of automated systems. They had retreated from the bright parts of the galaxy long ago, leaving machines to watch over the territories they claimed as their own. "They're old," Marcus said one night, studying data until his eyes burned. "Really old. Some of these structures we found date back 10,000 years, maybe more. They've been out here forever, just watching." "Then why contact us now?" Price asked. "We've been expanding into space for 50 years. Why wait until now to tell us to stop?" Grant thought about that question for a long time before answering. Maybe we finally crossed a line they couldn't ignore. Or maybe they're slower to respond than we think. If they've been around for thousands of years, they might not operate on the same timescale we do. A few decades might not seem like much to them. Commander Jake Sullivan led a different kind of investigation. He commanded the UESS Pathfinder, a stealth reconnaissance ship designed to go places without being detected. Morrison had given him a dangerous mission: get close to a Galactic Council facility and learn everything possible about their capabilities without being caught. Sullivan took his ship to a Council observation post orbiting a brown dwarf star in neutral space. For 4 days, the Pathfinder drifted silently, its passive sensors recording everything. Sullivan's crew analyzed every energy reading, every heat signature, every electromagnetic pulse from the alien station. "It's barely staffed," Sullivan reported back to Earth via encrypted transmission. "Maybe 10 or 12 life forms. Everything else is automated. But the power output is incredible. That station is generating more energy than our entire Pacific Fleet combined. Whatever weapons they have, they can throw a lot of firepower." Back on Earth, General Dixon took Sullivan's data and fed it into military computers. His strategic planning team ran thousands of simulations testing different scenarios. What would happen if humanity fought? The results were consistent and depressing. In almost every simulation, humanity lost. Not because the Council had more ships, though they might. Not because they had more soldiers, though they probably did. But because their technology was simply better. Their energy weapons were more powerful. Their shields were stronger. Their ships were faster. "We can hurt them," Dixon told President Morrison in a private briefing. "We can make them bleed. But we can't beat them in a straight fight, not with what we have now." "How long would we need?" Morrison asked. "How long to develop weapons and defenses that could match theirs?" Dixon looked at Dr. Nathan Cole, his research director. Cole had been coordinating with weapons manufacturers and research labs across Earth and all the colonies. 10 years minimum, Cole said carefully. More likely 15 or 20. We'd need to reverse engineer their technology and then innovate beyond it. That takes time. "We have 30 days, Morrison said coldly. Dr. Grant's team made another important discovery in the 3rd week. One of her researchers, a young woman named Kelly Foster, found something strange in the data from ancient alien ruins. "The Council isn't one species," Kelly said, showing her findings to the group. "Look at these biological traces. We found genetic material from at least 5 different species in Council facilities. Maybe more. So they're an alliance?" Price asked. "More like a club," Grant said slowly, understanding dawning on her face. "An exclusive club. Species that reached a certain level of technology and then decided to maintain control over their territories. They made rules and they enforced them. They don't want younger species expanding into spaces they consider theirs." Marcus pulled up more data. "Here's something interesting. We found records of other species in some of these ruins. Civilizations that existed thousands of years ago and then disappeared. There are gaps in the timeline. Places where evidence of a species just stopped suddenly." The room went quiet as everyone understood what that meant. The Galactic Council had been doing this for a long time. When younger species didn't obey their rules, the Council removed them. How many civilizations had been wiped out over the millennia? How many species had been erased from existence for the crime of expanding into the wrong territories? "They're gardeners," Grant said softly. "They see the galaxy as their garden, and they pull out any weeds that grow too tall. That's what they think we are." "Weeds." Price slammed his fist on the table. "Then we show them that this weed has thorns." Morrison received reports from all her intelligence teams as the 30-day deadline approached. Every piece of information painted the same picture. The Galactic Council was ancient, powerful, and utterly convinced of their right to control this part of space. They had maintained their order for thousands of years. They had crushed or absorbed every younger species that challenged them. But Morrison also learned something else. The council was small. Their actual population seemed to be relatively tiny. They relied heavily on automated systems and machines. They hadn't fought a real war in centuries, maybe longer. Their military doctrine was based on overwhelming shows of force against weaker opponents who would surrender quickly rather than face destruction. They're used to winning fast, Dixon said in a meeting with Morrison and her top advisors. They show up with superior firepower, destroy a few targets to prove they can do it, and the enemy surrenders. They haven't had to fight a prolonged conflict in living memory. Maybe they've forgotten how. Morrison looked at the intelligence summaries spread across her desk. Ships that were powerful but few in number. Bases that were lightly staffed. Weapons that were devastating but had never been tested against a determined opponent. They're bullies, she said quietly. They've been bullying younger species for so long, they don't remember what it's like to face someone who fights back. Gregory Palmer, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. Helen, even if everything we've learned is accurate, they're still stronger than us. Their technology is still more advanced. Picking a fight with them is still incredibly dangerous. I know, Morrison said, but now I also know they're not invincible. They're old. They're set in their ways. They expect obedience. Maybe that's a weakness we can exploit. She stood up and walked to the window of the Oval Office, looking out at the gardens. I'm calling a joint session of Congress tomorrow. It's time to give the American people and all of humanity a choice. We have the information now. We know what we're facing. Now we have to decide what we're going to do about it. The intelligence investigation had revealed the truth about the Galactic Council. They were powerful but not unlimited. Advanced but not invincible. They had rules and they enforced them ruthlessly. But they had never faced an opponent quite like humanity. An opponent too stubborn to surrender and too determined to give up. The deadline was approaching. In 7 days, humanity would have to give the Council an answer. Morrison already knew what her answer would be. The only question was whether the rest of humanity would stand with her when she delivered it. The debate consumed humanity. From Earth to the farthest colonies at the edge of explored space, people argued about what should be done. News networks ran constant coverage. Experts appeared on screens discussing every angle. Should humanity evacuate and survive? Should they stand their ground and risk everything? There was no easy answer, and everyone knew it. In the contested sectors, the colonists themselves began to organize. Governor Linda Martinez of New Columbia called for a system-wide vote. New Columbia was a thriving world with 6 million people. They had farms, cities, schools, hospitals. It was home. For 3 days, every adult citizen cast their vote on a simple question: stay or leave. The results were clear. 84% voted to stay. Martinez stood in front of cameras, broadcasting to Earth and every other human settlement. She was a short woman with steel-gray hair and a voice that carried conviction. This is our home, she said firmly. We didn't come here as invaders. We came as settlers. We built these cities with our own hands. We planted these crops. We raised our children here. We're not leaving because some ancient aliens decided this space belongs to them. If they want us gone, they'll have to force us out. And we won't make it easy. Her words echoed across the other contested colonies. On New Texas, a rough frontier world, the governor gave a similar speech. So did the leaders of Port Franklin, New Shanghai, Liberty Station, and all the others. The pattern was the same everywhere. The colonists wanted to stay. They were willing to fight for their homes. The Outer Rim territories, always independent-minded, began forming defense militias. They bought weapons from military contractors. They reinforced their orbital stations with armor and guns. They trained civilian volunteers to fight. These were people who had chosen to live on the edge of human space because they valued freedom above comfort. They weren't about to surrender that freedom now. Admiral Carter watched these developments from his command station with growing concern. He spoke privately with Lieutenant Hayes about it. They're making themselves targets, he said. If this goes badly, those colonies will be hit first and hit hardest. They know that, right? Hayes nodded slowly. They know. They're choosing it anyway. That's what makes them brave or crazy, maybe both. On Earth, the mood was more divided. People who had never left the home planet debated what should be done about colonies they'd never seen. Some argued for evacuation, better to retreat and survive than fight and die. Others wanted to stand firm. The colonies were part of humanity now. Abandoning them would be abandoning part of themselves. President Morrison let the debate run for 2 weeks. She wanted people to have their say. She wanted them to think through the consequences. But as the deadline approached, she knew a decision had to be made. She called for a joint session of Congress, and the announcement made headlines everywhere. The president would address the nation and the world. She would tell humanity what America's position would be. The chamber was packed when Morrison entered. Every seat filled. The gallery overflowing with citizens who had waited hours for the chance to witness this moment. Outside the Capitol, crowds gathered in the streets. Similar crowds formed in cities across Earth and on every colony world. Everyone watched. Everyone waited. Morrison stood at the podium and looked out at the assembled representatives. She took a breath and began. The Galactic Council has given us a choice. Retreat from our colonies or face their military enforcement. They've given us 30 days to abandon our homes, our investments, our future. They've given us 30 days to submit to laws we never agreed to, made by beings we never elected, enforced by threats we never deserved. She paused, letting her words sink in. I've spent the last 3 weeks consulting with our best minds. Our military leaders tell me we would likely lose a war against the Council. Our economists tell me that evacuation would trigger economic collapse. Our diplomats tell me the Council isn't interested in negotiation. They don't want compromise. They don't want discussion. They want compliance. They want obedience. Morrison's voice grew harder, more intense. Here's what I've learned about humanity in my years of public service. We're stubborn. We're difficult. We don't take orders well, especially from those who claim authority without earning it. We've spent our entire history fighting for the right to choose our own path. We've overthrown kings and emperors. We've resisted tyrants and dictators. We've always chosen freedom over submission, even when submission would have been easier. She looked directly into the cameras, knowing her words were being broadcast to billions of people. The Galactic Council has made a mistake. They've mistaken our youth for weakness. They've mistaken our small territory for timidity. They've mistaken our silence for consent. They don't understand us at all. Morrison placed her hands on the podium, gripping it firmly. Here's my answer to the Galactic Council. No, we will not abandon our colonies. We will not dismantle what we've built. We will not retreat because you demand it. These sectors are our home now. The people living there are our people. If you want those territories, you'll have to take them by force, and we'll resist every step of the way. The chamber erupted. Some people cheered loudly, standing to applaud. Others shouted in protest, angry at the decision. Morrison waited for the noise to settle before continuing. To the colonists in the contested zones, I say this. Earth stands with you. We will not abandon you. We will defend your right to live in the homes you've built. You are not alone. She turned to address different audiences. To our military personnel, prepare for what comes next. We may be outgunned, but we are not without resources. We are not without courage. Do your duty and defend our people with everything you have. Finally, she looked back at the camera, speaking directly to the aliens who had threatened them. To the Galactic Council, humanity has given you our answer. We reject your ultimatum. We reject your authority over us. We claim the right to live where we choose and expand where we will. If you want to remove us, come and try. Do your worst. We'll be ready. Morrison stepped back from the podium. The chamber descended into chaos. Some representatives cheered. Others argued furiously. The Speaker of the House banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. Outside, the crowds had similar reactions. Some celebrated, some protested. Everyone had opinions and everyone wanted to be heard, but the decision was made. Morrison had committed the United States, and by extension the unified Earth government, to a path of resistance. There would be no evacuation, no retreat, no submission to the Council's demands. Gregory Palmer found Morrison in her private office after the speech. She was sitting quietly, the weight of what she'd just done pressing down on her. The polls are coming in, Palmer said. You're at 53% approval for the decision. 41% opposed. The rest undecided. Morrison nodded. She'd expected something like that. And the colonies? Overwhelming support. 90% or higher on most worlds. They're with you completely. That's what matters, Morrison said. They're the ones who will face the consequences first. If they're willing to fight, how can I tell them to run? Palmer sat down across from her. You know this might be the end of everything, right? If the Council hits us hard enough, fast enough, we might not survive. Human civilization could end because of the choice you just made. Morrison met his eyes. Greg, Human civilization would have ended anyway if we'd chosen to run. Maybe not physically, but in every way that matters. We would have proven that we'll surrender whenever someone stronger threatens us. We would have abandoned our own people to save ourselves. That's not a civilization worth preserving. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at Washington. Besides, I don't think we're going to lose. The Council is strong, but they're not invincible. They've been bullying younger species for thousands of years. They've forgotten what it's like to fight someone who refuses to quit. We're going to remind them. Palmer wanted to share her confidence, but he'd seen the intelligence reports. He knew how powerful the Council was. I hope you're right. Because in 7 days, they're going to respond. And when they do, everything changes. Morrison turned back to face him. Then we better use those 7 days well. Get the word out to every colony, every ship, every station. Make sure everyone knows the plan. When the Council comes, and they will come, we need to be ready to hit them hard. Not just defend, attack. Show them that humans don't just roll over when threatened. Over the next week, humanity prepared. Ships moved into defensive positions. Weapons were distributed. Plans were made. And through it all, people waited. Some with fear. Some with determination. Some with a mixture of both. The colonists on New Columbia watched their skies, knowing the Council fleet might appear at any moment. Governor Martinez walked the streets of the capital city, talking to people, reassuring them, preparing them for what might come. We made our choice, she told a crowd gathered in the central square. Now we live with it. Whatever happens, we face it together. On Earth, Morrison spent her final days before the deadline meeting with military commanders, checking preparations, making sure everything possible had been done. She didn't sleep much. How could she? The fate of billions rested on decisions she'd made, but she didn't regret those. The final 7 days before the deadline became the most intense period in human history. Every resource, every person, every ship was mobilized for what everyone knew was coming. Admiral Carter coordinated the largest military deployment humanity had ever attempted. It was organized chaos on a scale that would have been impossible just a generation earlier. Every vessel that could mount a weapon was pulled into service. Military warships formed the core of the defense fleet, but they were joined by armed cargo haulers, converted mining ships, and even luxury yachts fitted with missile pods. If it could fly and carry a gun, it was drafted into the defense forces. Captains who had spent their careers hauling freight or passengers suddenly found themselves training for combat operations. Orbital defense platforms sprouted around human worlds like metal forests. Construction crews worked around the clock, welding together frameworks of steel and composite armor. Each platform bristled with railguns, missile launchers, and laser batteries. They wouldn't stop a determined assault, but they would make any attacker pay a price for every inch of space they took. Lieutenant Hayes coordinated the logistics from her station above Earth, and the scale of the operation was staggering. Food, ammunition, fuel, spare parts, medical supplies, everything had to be moved to the right place at the right time. She worked 18-hour days, surviving on coffee and determination. Her team created backup plans for every scenario they could imagine. Evacuation routes if colonies fell. Supply lines that could continue operating even under attack. Communication protocols if the main networks went down. We're not trying to win, Hayes explained to her exhausted logistics officers during a brief meeting. We're trying to survive long enough to make them reconsider. Every day we hold out is a day we can adapt and learn. Every ship they lose is one less ship they have. We make it too expensive for them to keep fighting. Deep in her research facility, Dr. Lisa Grant pushed her team to weaponize every scrap of alien technology they'd collected over the years. They couldn't replicate the Council's power generators or shields, but they could learn from the principles and improve their own designs. Human shields wouldn't stop Council weapons, but they could be layered deeper and recharged faster. Human weapons wouldn't punch through Council defenses easily, but they could be built in greater numbers and fired more rapidly. It's a numbers game, Grant told General Dixon during one of his visits to her lab. We can't match their quality, so we overwhelm them with quantity. 100 of our missiles might not be as good as one of their weapons, but if we fire 1,000 missiles at once, some will get through. We make every engagement cost them something. Dixon nodded slowly, understanding the strategy. Death by 1,000 cuts. Exactly, Grant confirmed. They're used to crushing opponents with superior firepower. They're not used to fighting someone who can absorb losses and keep coming. We need to be the opponent they can't break, no matter how hard they hit us. Commander Jake Sullivan continued his reconnaissance work, pushing deeper into Council space than any human had gone before. His crew aboard the Pathfinder gathered intelligence on Council fleet deployments, base locations, and supply routes. What they discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. The Council's active military was smaller than expected, maybe a few dozen major warships, supported by thousands of automated drones and defense platforms. But their force projection was enormous because of how powerful each ship was. A single Council vessel could probably defeat an entire human battle group. They'd maintained control of their territories not through overwhelming numbers, but through overwhelming technological superiority. They haven't fought a real war in centuries, Sullivan reported to Carter during an encrypted transmission, maybe longer. Their whole military doctrine is built around showing up with superior force and watching the enemy surrender. They don't have plans for prolonged conflict. They don't have experience with opponents who refuse to quit after the first engagement. Let's hope that inexperience is something we can exploit, Carter replied, because we're going to need every advantage we can get. The civilian population mobilized alongside the military. Factories across Earth and the colonies converted to wartime production. Assembly lines that had built cars and computers now produced missiles and armor plating. Workers put in double shifts knowing that every weapon they built might save lives when the fighting started. Volunteers stepped forward by the millions. Some joined military auxiliaries, receiving basic training in case ground forces were needed. Others signed up for civil defense units, preparing to maintain order and provide emergency services if colonies came under attack. Parents sent their children to safer worlds deeper in human territory, tearful goodbyes at spaceports becoming a common sight. On New Columbia, Governor Martinez oversaw the evacuation of all children under 12 years old. It was a painful decision, breaking up families but necessary. The kids need to be safe, she told crying parents at the spaceport. When this is over, you'll see them again. That's a promise I intend to keep. Dr. Nathan Cole, working with weapons manufacturers and university research departments, pushed for rapid innovation. We have 7 days to develop and deploy weapons systems that normally take years, he told his team. Ignore safety testing. Ignore efficiency concerns. If it shoots and it might hurt them, we build it and we deploy it. They came up with creative solutions, railguns that fired projectiles at even higher velocities, trading barrel life for increased penetration, missiles packed with shaped charges designed to exploit weaknesses in energy shields, autonomous drones that could swarm Council ships, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. None of it was elegant, but all of it was deadly. The mining colonies contributed in their own way. They'd been pulling rare metals and minerals from asteroids for decades. Now they turned that expertise toward military purposes. Mines were laid along likely approach vectors to human space. Not sophisticated weapons, just large masses of rock and metal accelerated to high speeds and left drifting in space. Any ship that hit one would have a very bad day. Admiral Carter assembled his fleet commanders for a final briefing 3 days before the deadline. Officers appeared on screens from across human space, representing hundreds of ships and thousands of personnel. Carter looked at their faces and saw determination mixed with fear. Good. Fear kept you alive. Overconfidence got you killed. The Council expects us to fold, Carter told them. They're used to species that surrender after seeing a demonstration of force. We're not going to give them that satisfaction. When they arrive, and they will arrive, we engage immediately. We hit them hard. We show them that humans fight back. He pulled up tactical displays showing the defensive arrangements around the contested colonies. Our strategy is simple. Make them pay for every system they take. Force them to commit more resources than they planned. Drag this out. The longer we survive, the more time we have to adapt and learn. Eventually, they'll have to decide if removing us is worth the cost we're inflicting. One of the commanders, a veteran named Captain Helen Parks, asked the question everyone was thinking. Admiral, what if they decide we're worth any cost? What if they're willing to wipe us out completely? Carter met her eyes through the screen. Then we make sure we hurt them badly enough that the next young species that comes along has a chance. We establish the precedent that pushing humans around isn't free. Even if we lose, we make them remember us. The meeting ended and the commanders returned to their ships. Carter sat alone in his office looking at status reports. The fleet was as ready as it could be. Defensive positions were established. Supply lines were secured. Civilian evacuations were complete. Everything that could be done had been done. Lieutenant Hayes entered without knocking, something she never did unless it was important. Admiral, we're picking up strange energy readings in deep space. Multiple locations. The sensors can't identify what's causing them, but the patterns are consistent with the Council technology we've studied. Carter felt his stomach tighten. They're staging their forces, getting ready to jump in. That's my assessment, Hayes confirmed. We have maybe 48 hours, possibly less. Carter stood and walked to the window of his office, looking down at Earth below. Billions of people down there going about their lives, most of them not understanding how close they were to a war that could end their civilization. He'd sworn an oath to protect them. Now he'd find out if he could keep that promise. Send the alert to all commands, he ordered. Battle stations. This is not a drill. The Council is coming, and when they arrive, we're going to show them what humans are made of. The word spread quickly through the fleet. Ship crews that had been nervously waiting suddenly shifted into focused preparation. Weapons were charged. Shields were brought online. Pilots climbed into their fighters and ran final checks. The long wait was almost over. On Earth, President Morrison received the same intelligence report. She read it carefully, then looked at the people gathered in the Situation Room. It's time. Send out the final message to all colonies. Tell them to stand ready. Tell them Earth is with them. And tell them that whatever happens in the next few days, they should remember that we chose this. We chose... Day 30 arrived with the cold precision of clockwork. The Galactic Council's response was exactly what everyone expected, yet somehow worse than anyone had imagined. Their fleet didn't arrive gradually or with warning. They simply appeared, as if reality itself had split open to let them through. 3 contested star systems simultaneously lit up with energy signatures. Not hundreds of ships. Not thousands. 12 massive vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel, each one accompanied by clouds of smaller automated drones that numbered in the thousands. The Council had sent a message with their fleet composition. They didn't need overwhelming numbers. 12 ships would be enough. Admiral Carter watched from his command station as the lead Council ship approached New Columbia. The vessel was enormous, dwarfing even the largest human battleships. Its hull seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as Ambassador Velkoth, light moving through it in hypnotic patterns. It was beautiful in the way a storm was beautiful, terrible, and awe-inspiring. All batteries stand ready, Carter ordered across the fleet channel, his voice steady despite the fear he felt. Weapons free on my command. Let's show them what they're dealing with. The human defense fleet had been waiting in carefully prepared positions. 200 ships of various sizes, from massive battleships to nimble frigates. They'd been arranged to create overlapping fields of fire, every angle covered, every approach protected. It was the best defensive formation human military strategists could devise. Fire, Carter commanded. The space around New Columbia erupted with violence. Missiles launched by the thousands, their engines burning bright as they accelerated toward the Council ship. Railguns fired solid slugs at velocities that made them into relativistic weapons. Energy beams stabbed out from human ships, powerful enough to cut through asteroids. The barrage was overwhelming, a wall of destruction that would have shattered any human fleet. The Council ship's shields absorbed everything, not deflected, not scattered. Absorbed as if the attacks had simply ceased to exist upon touching the alien defenses. The massive vessel continued its approach, completely unaffected by the firepower being thrown at it. Then it fired back. A single beam of energy, impossibly bright, impossibly concentrated. It struck the largest orbital defense platform above New Columbia, and the structure simply ceased to exist. Vaporized in an instant. 12,000 military, personnel and civilian contractors died before they even knew they were under attack. One moment they were there, the next they were atoms scattered across space. Evasive maneuvers, Carter shouted across all channels. All ships scatter and engage mobile tactics. Do not stay still. Do not present a stationary target. The human ships broke formation, using their superior numbers and maneuverability to their advantage. They couldn't hurt the Council ship directly, but they could target the automated drones. Those proved more vulnerable. Human missiles found their marks, tearing through drone after drone. Explosions blossomed in space like deadly flowers. But for every drone destroyed, the Council ships took a heavier toll on human forces. Another energy beam lanced out, catching the battleship Defiant as it tried to maneuver. The ship's shields held for exactly 2 seconds before collapsing. The beam cut through the hull like it was paper. 1,600 crew members died instantly. Lieutenant Hayes worked frantically at her station, coordinating fleet movements and trying to minimize casualties. "Admiral, we're taking heavy losses. The New Columbia Defense Fleet is down to 68% combat effectiveness. Port Franklin is reporting similar numbers. Liberty Station is at 53%. "Keep them fighting," Carter ordered, though his heart was breaking with every ship he lost. "We knew this would be costly. Make every loss count for something." In another contested system, Commander Sullivan executed the plan he'd been preparing for weeks. While the Council fleet engaged the main human forces, his stealth ships struck at their supply infrastructure in deep space. The automated repair stations and fuel depots that supported Council operations had been left undefended. Why would they need defense? No one had ever attacked them before. Sullivan's ships destroyed them methodically. Missile strikes against immobile targets. It wasn't glorious combat, but it was effective. Each facility destroyed was one less resource the Council could use to sustain their assault. "Admiral, we're getting reports from Sullivan's group," Hayes called out. "They've successfully destroyed 17 Council support facilities, fuel reserves, repair stations, communication relays. The Council is having to pull resources from other areas to maintain their offensive." Carter felt a grim satisfaction. "Good. We can't beat them in a direct fight, but we can make them work for every inch. Keep hitting their support structure. Make this operation expensive." The battle raged for 3 days. 72 hours of continuous combat across 3 star systems. Human forces fought with desperate courage, using every tactic they could devise. They hid behind asteroids and struck from unexpected angles. They used their superior numbers to swarm individual targets. They sacrificed damaged ships in ramming attacks when nothing else would work. The casualties were staggering. The human defense fleet lost 40% of its deployed forces. 6 colonies suffered significant damage from Council bombardments. Ground installations were destroyed. Orbital stations were reduced to wreckage. The death toll climbed past 100,000 and kept rising. But humanity drew blood too. Not from the massive Council ships, those remained untouchable by human weapons. But the automated drones died by the thousands. Sullivan's raiders destroyed dozens of Council support facilities. Human forces even managed to damage one of the smaller Council vessels when 3 battleships coordinated a simultaneous strike on a single shield section, overwhelming it just long enough for a missile barrage to get through. The Council ship survived, but it was hurt. The damage was visible, crystalline hull cracked and leaking atmosphere. It withdrew from the battle, the first time a Council vessel had retreated from an engagement in living memory. On the 4th day, something changed. The Council fleet stopped attacking. They held their positions, weapons charged but not firing. Human forces maintained their defensive formations, wary of a trap. For 6 hours, both sides simply watched each other across the void. Then Ambassador Velkoth's transmission arrived. The alien appeared on every screen again, just as it had 30 days earlier. But something was different. The confidence was gone. The flat, emotionless tone had been replaced by something that might have been concern. "Your resistance has been noted," Velkoth said. "Your losses are significant. Your military forces are reduced. Your defensive positions are damaged. You have demonstrated your willingness to fight. You have also demonstrated the futility of that fight. Our weapons are superior. Our defenses are stronger. You cannot win." The ambassador paused as if choosing its next words carefully. "However, your resistance has exceeded projections. The Council underestimated your determination. We underestimated your willingness to accept casualties. We underestimated your tactical adaptability." Another pause. "The Council will deliberate on the appropriate response to your defiance. Further communication will follow. Until that time, offensive operations are suspended." The transmission ended. Across human space, people tried to understand what had just happened. Had they won? No, clearly not. Had they lost? Not exactly. They'd survived. That was something. In the White House Situation Room, President Morrison stood before her exhausted advisors. General Dixon looked 10 years older than he had a month ago. The stress of managing a war against superior opponents had aged him visibly. "What's the assessment?" Morrison asked. "They hurt us badly," Dixon said bluntly. "We lost 40% of our deployed military assets. 6 colonies took major damage. The death toll is over 120,000 and still being counted. But we hurt them too. Not as much as they hurt us, but enough that they're stopping to reconsider their approach." "Will they come back?" Morrison asked. Admiral Carter's voice came through the communication link from his orbital station. "Almost certainly. But not tomorrow. Maybe not next week. They'll study what we did. They'll analyze our tactics. They'll develop countermeasures. When they return, they'll be better prepared." "Then we prepare too," Morrison said firmly. "We rebuild our forces. We learn from what worked and what didn't. We develop new weapons and new tactics. They wanted to teach us our place in their galaxy. Instead, they learned something about us." Dr. Lisa Grant appeared on one of the screens calling in from her facility. Her team had been working without sleep for days, analyzing every scrap of data from the battle. "Madam President, we captured some intact drone technology. My team is already tearing it apart. We're learning how their systems work. Give us time, and we'll turn their own innovations against them." Morrison nodded slowly, then asked the question everyone was thinking. "How much time do we have before they come back?" 6 months, Dixon estimated. Maybe as much as a year if we're lucky. The Council will need to mobilize additional forces. Based on what we learned about them, that's not something they do quickly. They're not set up for rapid deployment. They're used to crushing opponents with minimal effort.